All
Hello,
right.
Ken.
Hello. So I am here. I'm Hannah Judson, and I've gone live with Kathy Greenholdt, who is joining me from Chicago, Illinois, USA. Um, it's Friday. It's Friday, November 6th, 2020. And I feel like we're having this conversation during an extremely monumental historical moment. Like we probably shouldn't even be talking now, except what are we going to do? Watch the news.
Right, just keep refreshing browsers.
Exactly. The news will be there when we get off this call. But I asked you to join me on this call because I've followed you for years. You're an excellent songwriter. I know,
As
I
are
know.
you.
Well, thank you. And I know people you know, and
Right.
I want to talk about Chicago and working with Steve Dawson as a producer and other Chicago things. So happy to talk about all of that. But let's just start. Let's pull back on all of that, and let me just ask you, how are you?
I'm good. It's a crazy time right now. I mean, it's been a crazy year, right? But right now with the presidential election going on, it's a little more, less peaceful, I guess, as everybody's wondering how things will turn out. Although I think they're going to turn out pretty well, actually, and very soon. Here in Chicago, we have had extremely beautiful weather the last
Well,
few days, and so that's really good too for our spirits.
yeah. So yeah, Chicago. So I haven't lived in Chicago for 15 years,
Uh-huh.
and I think the weather probably has changed a little bit since we lived there. But when
Yeah,
it's beautiful, you own it. I mean,
right.
you
When you
earn
can
those
get it, you
beautiful
can
days.
get it. Because October was really cold. So, and it'll get really cold again next week. So but it's a nice, we take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what's the vibe in Chicago right now?
Um, well, um, we are a blue state, so I think everybody's pretty hopeful here. I think we thought it would be a bluer election than it is, but I also think there are a number. The issues are never like black and white, and there are a lot of gray areas, and there are so many things going on with the virus and the economy and such. I think it was easy for people to try to shut out some of these things and perhaps latch on to something that, even though the person is, you know, spouting and people devoted to the person devote spouting a lot of misinformation. People want things to go away. They want to feel better, and
Yeah,
for a variety of reasons, then they make decisions in
yeah,
that way.
yeah,
So
yeah. So it's been a weird year. I think
yes,
that's a theme that comes up in every conversation. No, I mean, we sort of create our own normalcy and move through
hmm
in our own normalcy, but then you sort of look out and you're like, yeah, this has been such a weird year. So
yeah.
many things have happened.
And here, like where you are too, the virus has resurged, although here it never was really tamped down very well. So, and as we head into the holidays and the cold months, it's a big concern for everybody, of course. So,
Yeah, yeah. It is a big concern, and we don't know how it's going to play out. It's extremely ambiguous.
mhm.
One thing that I did notice today is that there hasn't been much talk about the flu. People don't seem to be getting the
Right,
flu right now. I was like, yeah, because we're all sequestered.
right, right. Did get a flu shot. Just
Yeah.
good to
So
do.
I have to tell you, I hardly ever go out. I work from home. I've got
Uh-huh.
my music studio at home.
That's
I
nice.
am we're allowed to leave the house for an hour a day. So I do take that hour
Wow.
to
Okay.
exercise. If you have
Yeah.
other things, if you have to go to the doctor or other official things, you
Yeah.
can do that also. But it's pretty tamped down, and I'm with the program. Like I feel,
Right. We
yeah,
have to be with the program.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
hopefully they're making some progress on vaccines and things like that.
Yeah.
So with the whole world working together on it. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It is so interesting how we are accustomed to our, our national narratives and our borders and our boundaries and our language and culture differences and all this stuff. But but those borders and boundaries and differences are so blurry, and they always were. And nationalism is a construct that gets used for political purposes, and we certainly have seen that recently. But the virus knows nothing about all the stuff. It's just humans. I'm going to go do my thing. The virus is doing its thing, and I just wonder how it will all play out. Like if people will take more, if we can become a world where we take responsibility for each other in an easy way, rather than not just like, oh, I donate my money and my time to this cause, but just actually because we are actually related and we are actually responsible for each other. I wonder.
I feel like the world we are going through something, but that we are going to come out on the other side better people. I mean, I think civilization takes tiny steps forward, and then it'll take some steps back. But they're always along the way we make progress, I think, towards becoming better people. And it just isn't always obvious because it's hard for people to let go their understanding of how life should be sometimes for themselves or their families or their communities. And so people will fight against change. Change is hard for a lot of people, but it is also inevitable. There is always change. And so I think it's important to look at the long view of the world and civilization, even though, mind you, we have some super pressing issues right now concerning, the environment, climate change and such. But we have to just keep being positive about it. And we also have to keep looking at how others view the world so that we can understand each other better. So
I feel like that is a key takeaway. I was talking about that with a friend the other day. In the United States, we've had this, not just election, but we've had these years of such divisive activities and problems and people seeing things differently. And it's really easy to vilify and to write off people who are saying and doing things that you think are really stupid. And it's much harder to try to understand them. And it doesn't mean you have to say it's okay, but it's coming from somewhere. It's coming from something real. And what is that? And what can we do about that? And I feel like understanding other people and being in there with them is going to be part of our progress forward.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
Hello. That sounds like a real phone.
Yes, I meant to turn that off before we start.
So, but I don't know if we can do that or not. But I do think that the anger and the just that I think that we have to change the way we organize our emotions and our responses. I mean, not just in general, to a state of understanding, because once you have that understanding, then you can do something about it. But you can't get anywhere with anybody if you tell them that you think they're stupid. Like that's not going to work. That doesn't. You think you're stupid right back. So,
I have two friends, one from college and one who lives in my neighborhood, who are new state legislators in my state, Illinois. And they are on opposite sides, totally opposite sides of the political spectrum. But I've introduced them to each other, and they are going to, I think, get together over some lunch or some beers and get to know one another. And I think once you can establish some common ground with each other as human beings, then you're actually able to start conversations with each other about how can we solve these problems, you know, in a way too that might be mutually acceptable to both of
Yep.
us. I mean, some issues there is right and there's wrong, but
Yeah.
for many issues there is something more in the middle.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Well, bravo on that introduction. I think that sort of goes along the line of what I was, how I feel like what our next steps are, exactly that. And I think also our next steps exactly on that same topic have to do with local action, like what we can actually do. I mean, we spend a lot of emotions and time and energy following things that are pretty far removed. I mean, I
yes,
personally feel, besides voting, but
yeah,
like having conversations with people and taking sides and
yeah.
answering something on, I
Hmm.
try to not do that. I try to
Hmm.
not answer things on, like, Facebook or whatever, political
Hmm.
things. But, what we can actually do are have conversations with people we know and the
Hmm.
people they know, and we can
Hmm.
understand the world a little bit more locally. I
Right.
think that's where a lot of answers lie.
Yeah. Hmm. In fact, yeah, that's a lot of activists in my neighborhood too. That is their thing, hyper local. So,
Hyperlocal.
yeah.
Oh, I like that. I like that
Mhm.
phrase, hyperlocal. I haven't heard about that.
Mhm.
Well, so we've been talking about all the big stuff, and probably we'll loop back to that. But I did want to make sure that we don't forget to talk about your music, which is why I did invite you to this conversation. Um, I remember in 2016 when you released a really great record. I think it was called, I'm going to look at your list of records. It was called Pilgrim in 2016.
Ah,
And I remember that the songwriting came out of a journey that you took. And then you wrote and released Halos Are History in 2017. And then most
mhm,
recently, you've got a record, If, that you
mhm.
released this summer. I've got questions about each record, but do you want to start? Can you tell us maybe the story of If, and then we can maybe work our way backwards? Um,
Well, if is came from a lot of different places. The songs on it, and there isn't a cohesive theme, I'd say, to it. The songs came from a variety of different places, but starting with the Pilgrim record is when I started traveling to
yeah,
Europe,
yeah,
um, and um, and that just really, oh my goodness, inspired so much in me musically and otherwise. And so I just kept returning, and and a couple of the songs on If come from spaces in Europe too. One being Assisi, Italy,
oh,
and another being Athens, Greece. So
wow,
those were places I was fortunate enough to visit last year. And in addition to being a songwriter, I have a day job 4 days a week as a graphic designer. And I work for the Jesuits in the Catholic Church. And I also grew up Catholic. Um, my personal spirituality is not exactly in line with things that I grew up with, but I've been really fascinated by the saints in the Catholic Church, and
mhm,
particularly the female ones, and
mhm,
particularly, most of all, the ones who there is a strong historical record of. Because a lot of these people were, um, in addition to being extremely devout, they also were theologians and um, historians in a way, and philosophers who each contributed interesting ideas to the question of why are we here? Why does humanity exist? And is there anything that comes after we no longer exist or
yeah,
before we existed? Or
yeah,
um, so I've been drawn to these people and to looking at history um, as something that has added to each of us
yeah,
over the millennia. Everything that came before us has led to where we are now.
Yeah.
And then we each contribute to history too. Um, and when I travel to other places, and especially places where I can really see the arc of the history over a long period of time, you really feel part of that. And so looking at questions, historical questions, um, questions of nature and the earth,
Mhm.
all of these things feed my music, as well as questions of the present day, social issues.
Mhm. As you were traveling, were you writing or were you just sort of?
I The first time I traveled was with people from work, and it was just sort of a first time experience.
Mhm.
Then the next time I traveled was a different, and so that was actually a pilgrimage where we were learning about Saint Ignatius of Loyola, Spain, and visiting the places where he lived and worked in
Cool.
Spain and Rome. Um, and The next time I traveled was a very different kind of pilgrimage. And both of these led to that album, The Pilgrim.
Mhm.
Um, at the time I was first traveling, my younger sister, Lynn, was undergoing cancer treatments. And the following year, she passed away. And Lynn was a huge traveler and
Mhm.
strongly encouraged me to apply for that first pilgrimage. She said it will change your life, and it did,
Mhm.
obviously. But the next pilgrimage was to travel to back to Spain and also to Paris and
Mhm.
with my sister's friends, and we scattered her ashes.
Mhm.
Um, and then I returned to France again um, later, specifically as a songwriting research trip.
Mhm.
I looked up who are some saints I might be interested in learning about. And I'd always been interested also in Joan of Arc and
Mhm.
Teresa of Lisieux, who both of them I had written about in prior albums.
Mhm.
But I went way south to Lourdes and learned
Yeah.
about Bernadette. Um, and I went to the town of, I don't know if I pronounce things correctly because I studied Spanish, but Albi,
Yeah.
where there's a giant cathedral dedicated to the patron saint of music, Cecilia, who actually is probably fictitious and doesn't exist. Um, but her story was that she was persecuted as one of the early Roman Christians, and put to death for her faith. But in Albi,
Uh-huh.
they had built this giant cathedral dedicated to her, and it was the site of this huge massacre
Yeah.
of heretical Christians by
Yeah.
the Catholics.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was extremely ironic. And I wanted to kind of learn more about that place, see that place, and learn about those people too. Um, I'm trying to think who the third saint that I wrote about after this one, because obviously those were two that really influenced me while I was in France then. But I had seen online that there was going to be a concert of Hildegard von Bingen's music in the small town in the Dordogne.
Mm.
Do you say Rocamadour? I'm not sure, but it's a cliffside, beautiful
Yeah.
medieval town, and there was going to be a concert of her medieval music in there. So
Wow.
she was a nun from Germany who was also a composer, and so I built the trip actually around that, and that was a pretty phenomenal experience, and also hilarious because at the end of the performance, I stood up to give a standing ovation, and I was the only one. And all the local people sort of stared at me. And I was like,
Was it
sat
not?
back down.
Yeah, I've been there, done that too.
So,
But no, that's lovely.
yeah.
So that trip that you just described
Uh-huh.
um, was sort of the seed material for your second record, Hail as a History. Is that true? Or
Right. So, yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah. Yes. And then I'd had the couple songs I'd already written before about Joan and Teresa, and those were on earlier albums. So Steve and I re-recorded them for this
cool.
project. Um, and then and then there were other saints too that came along for that. And there have been more since. And I don't just write about saints, but it's just really fascinating to me. And my songwriting has turned almost to this academic thing,
Yeah,
right? Where I love researching the people and places.
yeah.
And so I read a lot of books and biographies, and then go to be in these places. So like last year when I was in Assisi, I'm like, oh yeah, Francis, everybody loves him. But I was actually interested in learning about Claire, who was the first woman follower.
Wow.
So, and a lot of the women, even though they have lived cloistered lives, but we're talking about the Middle Ages. There
Yeah.
weren't many options for women. And some of
Mhm.
these women were just so strong and also powerful and respected by men at a time when people thought women didn't have the same brains as men,
Yeah.
and women weren't allowed to travel and things. But for example, Teresa of Avila, she's just like, I'm going to start this new order of Carmelites, and we're just going to travel all over Spain and set up these monasteries for men and women all over the place. Okay. And then she was a tremendous businesswoman, raised money for these things and traveled all over, when no one, if you were a woman, would be leaving your hometown.
So what do you think that is? Like, what's the difference between people who sort of follow their role and people who do not? What do they have? Like nothing to lose, or
Um, I don't know. I just they they seem to have a tremendous amount of self-worth. I had a really difficult time writing about Catherine of Siena, Italy. She was an advisor to powerful men throughout Tuscany and the Pope. And so the papacy had moved to southern France for a long time, and she got him to move back to Rome.
really?
And people would follow her. She was a mystic too, and they would follow her around and kiss her hands and stuff. And people would be appalled, and she'd like, I don't really care if they, I don't care. It doesn't mean anything to me. But I was like, really? I'm having a hard time relating to you. But that's just who she was. She was like,
Right.
I am just going to follow my path and do what I want, and I don't care what other people do. So, and I guess the thing about it is, I mean, there have always been people like this. Mostly, though, in history, we think of them as men who have, that we see. I mean, like, Napoleon, people strong, and then we don't hear as much about the women, except maybe Cleopatra, and a
Right.
few others, Queen Elizabeth. But I don't think there's anything different between the people who lived in these earlier times than who live now. It's just that now people are afforded more freedoms. Because of the way things are, lifespans are longer. There are more opportunities for different types of education and for travel, and things that just didn't exist and weren't possible then. So I just think there have always been remarkable people, but also there wasn't much historical record about most
Yeah.
people, because there wasn't even anything written down. Everybody was illiterate too, you know, when
In
things were starting to be written down. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I love the Middle Ages. I'm a fan
Mhm.
of the Middle Ages. I like sort of delving into it. So I love this conversation. Are there any contemporary women who you think are similar to these Middle Age saints from the Middle Ages that you've been working with?
Huh. You know, I haven't given a lot of thought to that.
No.
There are many women in the political sphere like that, I think, all
Huh.
around the world.
Yeah.
And other spheres. I think women are just, they're everywhere now, really. Not that we still don't have a ways to go in certain things, but it it's just, I don't know, you know, if you look at the Catholic Church too, still a lot of the writing and such is done by men
Yeah.
more so than women.
Yeah.
Um, and it's more of, um, it's more, back then the church was people's lives, you know, in certain communities or
Yeah.
whatever religion that you practiced, and most people did practice some sort of religion, you know, that was everything. So
Mhm.
now it's different. We're a lot more humanistic, I think. So
For sure.
uh, but I just really enjoy going back in time and seeing what women could contribute. Now, I grew up, my mother was really active in the ERA movement, the Equal Rights Amendment, that still has not passed, but almost may pass
Yeah.
in the United States. And we always were going to rallies and, you
Hmm.
know, to the state legislature to watch the votes and um, activities related to that. But I also remember my mother giving us like coloring books and things with women like Shirley Chisholm and
Uh-huh.
women, you know, who had strong voices and were trailblazers, but not but in different spheres than you would have seen historically.
Yeah.
So. Mhm.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of women, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, so many women now. Hillary Clinton, um,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of people don't like her, but she had contributed so much over the course of her time in public service.
Mhm.
Um, so, and now hopefully we're going to have a really strong role model in a new, the first ever female vice president with Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
There are many wonderful women that we can look up to and who contribute to the thought and, you know, human thought and the arc of history
The
now.
arc of history.
So,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
different fields too, the arts and everywhere. So,
Yeah.
um,
So, taking the conversation a little bit back to your music, one thing that I just wanted to say, I love your music. I love your songwriting, and I really am amazed with the range of your voice. You have a beautiful voice, and there are times in your songs where your voice is absolutely angelic, where it is soaring above the song, and then there are times when you are a little bit more, I make country, a little more country, or a little bit more rock, and that's all in there in a beautiful sort of Midwestern way. Um, so your songwriting, who influences you when you're writing songs besides your subject matter, just in terms of musicians and guitarists and people that you have been listening to?
um, well, I listen to a lot of classical music, and I think that filters in sometimes. I listen to a lot of early music, like uh, the modern people who record the early music of,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
such as Hildegard von Bingen's
Yeah.
music and other early music. Um, and I listen to Chopin, and I do, when I first started writing music, I didn't start till I was 38. I just somehow decided I wanted to try that, but I needed to learn to play guitar. So I went to the Old Town School of Folk Music
Mhm.
here in Chicago. And at the time, Gillian Welch was extremely huge on sort of the alt country scene,
Uh-huh.
and I have all of her music. So she was, I think, a big influencer for me. And the reason was because even though her music is not simple, especially when you listen to a lot of, say, these guitar parts from her partner, David Rawlings, too, it sounds simple. It sounds accessible, like something that you could do. So,
Yeah.
so I'm like, maybe I could do that. So I took my 3 chords, and started writing.
Nice.
And so, and now I know a few more chords, but frankly, not that many. And I have a small bit of chords. And at some point, I dropped out of the guitar program there because I just was writing songs that were just coming and coming, and I couldn't concentrate on learning both. I just had to
Yeah.
do this. But then a friend of mine who was a songwriter too, I was at a bar with her and some other songwriters one night, and she said, "We're all taking Steve Dawson's songwriting class." I'm like, okay. So we all did, and she
Oh,
had been in it before. And
who
that's
was
how
in
I
that
met
circle?
Steve. My friend Melanie Budd, John Kuchai, who runs the Monday Night Acoustic Explosion for, like, I don't know, maybe a decade or 2 decades now. Now it's on hiatus because,
Yeah.
but, and my friend Freddie Harbo, I think, and I think my friend Eugenia Elliott. He
Mhm.
was the 5 of us, and so we were all in there, and that's how I met Steve. Um, and I took a couple of his classes, and they were really fun. And I'd also been in a place where I was struggling with, sometimes you get the writer's block or whatever. So that was really helpful for, uh, dislodging that. And he
Yeah.
is a fantastic songwriter and teacher too, as it turns out.
So
Um,
interesting.
but then when it was time to record my next album, actually, I couldn't afford the last person I'd worked with. And so Steve said, "Well, I record people, and here's how it works." I'm like, I could do that. So I started recording with him. And I've taken other classes with him sometimes where we just have already written songs and I'm looking for some feedback.
Mhm.
And it's been a while since I took any, but one of them that I took back then was in alternate tunings, which he
Oh,
uses
cool.
a lot of. And I was terrible and just terrible. I just would be so embarrassed every time I went to the class because these people were all wonderful guitar players and I was just clueless. But I took what he told us, and then I saw him at a concert some months later, and I said, I'm not figuring out how to strum with these alternate two. And he's like, "What are you talking about? Just play." So that's what I did. I just started making up chords. I mean, they are actual chords, but I don't know what they are. And then I meticulously write down how I have fingered different things.
Yeah.
And that really just opened up a whole new world too with the alt
Yeah.
tunings because I love that and just fingering and so much fun. So, but the first record, it was really fun working with Steve on our first one together. And so this last one this year, this was our fourth one, and I told him, "You're producer for life," because
Mhm.
he just really gets what I'm doing, and then he
Yeah.
brings so much to the process because I'm so limited on what I can do, and he can play like 1,000
Yeah.
instruments too.
Yeah.
And he's fun. He's fun to work with, and we record in his wife Diane Christensen's art studio, and it's just really wonderful being all around her art and things. And actually, her art. A big exhibit of her art opened today at the Museum of Contemporary Art in
Yeah.
Chicago, and it's really a big honor, and I'm super excited for her.
Yeah. It's an opera, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all inflatables, and I remember with the inflatables being in the studio, I'm like, what is going on in here? And then my husband, Paul Cody, who is also a songwriter, and one of the reasons why I became one, we went to see the exhibit of this exhibit at another museum.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful. It has original music, and the inflatables, they come up and down. They're like choreographed. It's amazing.
Beautiful.
So,
I wanted to tell you that, so when I very first moved to Chicago, when I moved to Chicago so many years ago, I didn't know anybody except for my roommate. I had a roommate from college, but I moved there just kind of on a whim I'd been living in Spain before, I moved to Chicago. And one of the first things I did was take a guitar class at the Old Town School of Folk Music. That was one of my first actions. And then one of the second things I did was befriend a young woman across the street. We were taking a painting class at the Art Institute together. She was like, my boyfriend's in a band. You got to come to Phyllis's Musical Inn with me. And so I didn't know where I was or anything. And so there I was down on on Division Street, Phyllis's Musical Inn, to see Steve and Diane. What was their band? Stump the Host. And in that room, I now know there were tons of people that I got. I mean, you were probably there too, but there were a lot of people in that room. But Chicago has such an interesting, cool music scene, and definitely Steve and Diane are at the hub of a lot of just great work.
Yeah,
and interesting people.
Yeah. So, and they're nice people. So, and they just live 2 blocks from Phyllis's.
Chicago. Wow.
Right. I've been going there since like 1987 or 6, I think. So,
yeah.
Because I would drive up there from college to see if a friend was helping to manage a band called Sold American. I don't know if you know them, but they would play there sometimes, and then other places. And, and then I lived in St. Louis, and I would drive up. So, but
I think my second gig ever was at Phyllis's Musical Inn.
Okay, awesome. That's the first place I sang in public ever. So
it's historical. It's historical.
It is. And Clem, who runs it, he is historical and wonderful. So
it's still there. And
yes.
Really? I thought it closed. And no. Oh.
No, I'm still there selling Christmas trees out of the back patio.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm so glad. So that was the thing. That was the thing about Chicago. So I moved there in the 90s, and I felt like the music and art scene was really open. I felt like it was a spacious, open, affordable, actualized scene that was taking place. Chicago's a wintertime city. It's cold all the time, except for a few months. And so it was taking place in these little interesting spaces. A lot of the spaces needed a lot of work.
Right.
High ceilings, spaces in the back. There was a scene there that was very particular to the city, and I wonder sometimes if it's still there, if it's all been spruced up since then, or I don't know.
Well, I think as like new people come into the city, or people who live here grow up and things, it's always changing. And so I think there are a lot of different kinds of music going on, and tons of it. And tons of different scenes, I'd say too. So yeah. So it's nice. There's a ton of music, and
I definitely miss it. When we moved to France, I sort of wondered if that would be sort of the end of this part of my life. And then it wasn't. I found other ways to do it. Mm-hmm. But definitely the ways I was doing it in Chicago were not the ways that I'm doing it here. It's it's a different scene. It's a different way of getting to know people, different kinds of venues. Things function pretty differently here. I had to start from scratch. Here, but that is another story. I also wanted to tell you that I have a song on my 2 records ago called Joan of Arc. And it's a song that I was reading about Joan of Arc, and then I was reading 3 books that were one book by Joan Didion. Joan Didion, do you know her? She's a writer. She's from California. She's from Sacramento. She was on the East Coast for a while. on both places at the same time. I was relating to her geography. She wrote about a bunch of stuff. When you read her writing, you're in good hands. So I really love Joan Didion. And then I'm reading about Joan of Arc, and I just started writing the song about the Joans, both of them. And so the song is called Joan of Arc, but it's about both Joans.
Excellent. That's how songs go, right? Sometimes you start out with one thing and then they're really about more than one thing.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So what are you writing about now?
Well, I am not writing right now because I go in cycles, but I'm about ready to start again. So I just really, I compartmentalize things. And at first I thought, that's not right. You should be writing all the time. But I recently read that actually a lot of people work that way. And it's how I like to work because I don't like to have too many things going on at one time in my life. It really stresses me out.
Yeah.
I consider myself, let's see, a contemplative, I guess. I'm somewhat introverted, and I saw a couple people who I know who are writers, not songwriters, but writers describe themselves that way. And I'm like, that's me. That's how I am too. I need space to think and absorb things about in life. So, I just, so this winter, I think is going to be a lot of writing. I've only written one song during the pandemic, and that was because my friend Jenny Binneman, who's a songwriter and also writes haikus and has photography with them and has a couple books, has turned these into other things where people write songs based on the haikus, and I've done a couple of those, and I did one during the pandemic, and that was really excellent to do. But I found it kind of hard to focus too right now. But the biggest thing is that I was releasing an album, so I wanted to give attention to that too. And that was so strange, as you yourself know, doing that right now, but also interesting. So, because I was like, well, what am I going to do with this album? It's all done. I want to put it out. And a couple of the songs were politically related, so I wanted them to go out too before the election.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to donate the money to the Biden campaign. So
Oh, wow.
that is how I released it, because it helped me from a personal standpoint feel that I could help the election in a way I wouldn't have been able to before, or what I felt should happen with the election, and also to give more meaning to me to be releasing my album out there now when I can't even do like a live proper show with a band and that kind of thing.
Wow.
So I did that on Bandcamp, and then that was a really gratifying thing too, and it made me feel like we're helping. So,
Yeah.
and then so yeah, but and I've ordered some books and things. I read this travel writer, Dervla Murphy. You were talking about women who are thinkers and things now, and I realized too, I was just talking about American women, so many women around the world who are contributing in so many ways, but and big and small. And one is this travel writer, Dervla Murphy, who's been writing since the 60s. And actually, on one of my trips home, I had seen a documentary about her while flying on Aer Lingus. I'm like, who is this? And then I started ordering her books. She's written about the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and she was able to talk to people on both sides because her family had been in the IRA, the original one, but and she liked to drink beer, so she could get in all the pubs and things. But she just has an expansive worldview. She took her bicycle from Ireland to India, and and benefited from the generosity of people who she met along the way, many of whom had nothing but shared things with her. So sorry, we still have a landline. Oh, my husband got it. Yeah, anyway, I went on a tangent there, but
but you were talking about your sort of cycle of writing, and so So it's sort of seasonal, and you've got your own seasons,
Yeah.
and
I
so are
write
you,
a lot. I love to sit out in the garden and write, and that's harder to do in the winter. But and then I'll be inside more. Although we put a plastic bubble in our, we're lucky to have a little space. So we have a backyard, and we put a plastic bubble tent out there
oh, cool.
and a little heater. So maybe it'll write out there, even in the snow.
I think there's going to be a lot of heaters, outside heaters. You know, people are going to be buying them this
Right.
winter. How are we going to get outside otherwise?
Right, right. But can I ask you, Hannah, because I'm dying to know, because you have this new awesome album and you have been counting down week by week, and that's a very excellent way to kind of negotiate this pandemic too. So what is going to happen in week one?
So what do oh, so I'm glad that there's some tension building. So my plan initially, I mean, it could be anything. I'm open to change, but initially I was thinking I was going to do a full band live streamed concert with my guys, but I
Uh-huh.
don't think we're going to be practicing or getting together anytime soon. So
Right.
I think week one will probably be a live stream concert.
Okay.
Maybe from this very room, which is my studio, my
Uh-huh.
office, my studio, or maybe, I don't know, upstairs
Right.
in another room in the house.
Right.
But yeah. So I think that that's what it will be, is a lockdown. But it's been interesting because I've been on a roll writing new songs, and I haven't
Okay.
to my old song. Now I'm calling the record my old songs already, but I do need to pull them out and polish them off if I'm going to perform them. And I might try to do something different, like maybe perform them all on an acoustic guitar or something. Maybe try to do something a little bit different with it.
Yeah.
But that's so like you, I released the record in the spring, which was March release,
Mm-hmm.
then pandemic, then we were on a lockdown here, and I had a very hard time getting stuff done this spring. And then I thought, well, I'll be songwriting, but that was foggy and blurry,
Yeah.
and just unproductive.
Yeah.
And then, but this summer, I kind of got a grip on the whole thing, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to do something to release this record.
Yeah.
So I just started and I wasn't sure exactly how it would be, but I've been calling it my backwards record release.
Right. I love that. That's
Um,
great.
so we did have a summer in France. We had a summer off. I don't know. We had a summer where we were allowed to travel, and it seemed
Mm-hmm.
like it was getting better. And
Yes, it did. I've been watching because my husband and I were supposed to go to Paris last May. So I keep watching. I watch all the time what's happening.
So yeah, borders are still shut, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I look forward to the day that the borders are lifted and we're all safe and we can
Yes.
see each other. And it is intense to feel. I don't personally feel trapped. I feel like, I mean, I could come and go, but my
Mhm.
family can't.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
but
that's the thing. Like my parents live in New Mexico, so
oh, wow.
it's hard to know when, and my mom's like, don't come here right now. Don't even think.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but hopefully we get to see each other soon. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
she's right. She is right. So,
Yeah. It's interesting. I've been on a cadence the past 4 or 5 years of seeing family in California every summer, and then going to the East Coast where I'm from and where my mother is, and seeing friends and family, sort of doing music in both places.
mhm.
So the past bunch of years, I've been super busy,
Yeah.
but I like being busy because I get things done.
Uh-huh.
And this has been definitely a period of reflection. So
Yes, I agree.
that cycle that I was
Uh-huh.
going to do again
Mhm.
suddenly went away, and I was like,
Mhm. Mhm.
like, but that was good. That was
Yeah.
good.
I think there are some really positive things. I really feel that too. There is a lot of reflection and a bit of a slowing down as we try to be more patient with things. So
For sure, that's a really key word about this period in history. It does require patience.
yeah.
So
That's what my dad says. Patience is a virtue.
Yeah, it certainly is. So patience is a virtue. I have a few questions prepared for you. One question is, I just wanted to ask you, what is your superpower?
Oh my gosh. I don't feel like I have a superpower, but I try to be nice to people.
I can see that. Yeah.
Seems like to me that's the point.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny because being nice, kindness, that's not a small thing. That creates the whole environment, as does being horrible. That also creates the whole environment. And I think that we've seen that play out on a political and national and international sphere. Right. And it's
right.
So when this call is over, probably you and I are both going to check the news because right. See what's happened since we've been talking. We haven't been able to check, but hopefully there can be at least a moment of calm, like, before we launch into the next 4 years of complaining about everything. But there can be a moment of just, and dare I say, kindness, that we could.
Too, I think after all we've been through, and we really give our leaders hell, I think, but it's very hard to govern. There are so many ways of looking at how things should work, and it's hard to govern. And yes, everything can always use improvement. But after all we've been through, maybe we can give people a little break now and also take a little more responsibility. So.
Yeah, that would be very, very good advice for all. So one thing that I want to make sure I do before we go back to the news and such, I want to make sure that I get the links in our chat to share with everybody. Can you see the chat on your side? I've got.
It says private chat. Yes, chat with the host and other guests. Yes.
If you click on that, you can see what other people have been typing, which is wonderful. And so I've just put in the chat your Spotify link.
Oh, and I just saw the comments.
There's comments, and so there's people here. And so I'm also going to put in your Bandcamp link. And I also want to put your website.
Okay.
So, and I just want to make sure.
The fundraiser for Joe is over at this point.
Okay.
But people can still go there for the record and stuff.
I think. So is there any other link that you'd like me to add where you would like people to?
I want to write something. Hello, people. I just now.
I should have told you earlier.
No, it's fine.
So
it's the first time I've done something like this.
Yeah. So it's relatively new to me too. This is I think my fourth live stream, and it's been a project that I incorporated into my Backwards record release. I just thought, well, I'll see about doing it.
It's fun.
It's been so great to talk to people.
Yes.
To talk about music and to talk about other things and to meet other people.
Yeah, I was so excited to talk to you half the world away too. Yeah. I mean, wow, it's amazing, really.
It is amazing. It's super cool. So I do hope the next time I speak to you will probably be in Paris or Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that day.
Me too. Yes. Totally.
Do you think that's going to be next year?
I so hope so.
Yeah.
Paul and I are sort of hoping that. So maybe summer, fall. Yeah. Please, oh please.
So what are you going to do with the rest of your day today after this call?
Well, I don't know, but actually I think I'm going to read out in the bubble. So
okay. Nice.
I hadn't thought beyond this because this was I was really looking towards this. So.
Okay. Same. Okay. Well,
how about you?
So for the rest of the day, okay, so it's almost 9 p.m. So I'm gonna have a glass of wine.
Nice. I probably won't do that yet myself. So.
Yeah, you get a few hours ago. So yeah, I try to not.
Tonight.
You know what? I think definitely tonight, as long as there's no shenanigans and things get derailed.
Right, right.
But I try to not have wine before these conversations. Just hold off. So, but it is Friday night, and it has been a massive day of news in the United States, and it seems like we're turning over what has been a gut-wrenching for some belief. We're turning off the gut-wrenching moment. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for making the time, and it's
Thank
been
you for inviting me, and I'm sorry about last week too. So.
No, see, the cool thing is we can do this whenever we want. We can do this again tomorrow.
That's right.
So definitely keep in touch, and let me know what's going on. And this was a great conversation. I loved hearing more about the basis and the root of your songs. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. I'm going to listen to them with a different ear this time. So everybody listening to this conversation, please do visit Kathy Greenholdt on Spotify, on her music page, and on Bandcamp.
And Hannah, congratulations and good luck on the rest of your backwards record.
Oh, thank you so much. Good. Well, thank you for coming, everybody, and your comments in the comments section. I think that you could probably still chat with,
okay,
or maybe not. I'm not sure how it all works. But we will be having there will be other conversations coming up, and I'll definitely let you all know. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Bye. See you guys later.